Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Ancient Mysteries Unearthed. I'm your host, Chris Noble. And today we're going to go up, up, up into the cosmos, get a not just a bird's eye view, we're going to get a galactic view of our history, of humanity's history, of our origins, and to really get it from this high up galactic perspective that is challenging to get access to this information, to get these perspectives, because there's just so much out there, not only on the web, but just people have experienced so many different things. What's true, what's not? Well, when we can get a galactic perspective on our history, it actually helps tie a lot of pieces together because, as we know, history is written by the victors, by those in power. And sometimes it's really hard to know what actually happened. And of course, if we don't know where we came from, how do we know where we're going? And this is so important, especially right now with where we are as a species. So, to tackle this topic, to get a galactic perspective on our history, I decided to have onto the show today Debbie Solaris. And she's an amazing individual who's had some incredible life experiences that have led her to amazing knowledge that she's going to be sharing with us today. But I'm going to give you a little background on Debbie before she introduces herself in a bit more detail here. So, with Debbie Solaris, she's actually an ET contactee. She's an interdimensional traveler, which I absolutely love. And she's a galactic historian. Obviously, that's what we'll be focusing on today. And after a fateful extraterrestrial contact experience a couple of years ago, Debbie awakened to her true star lineage and her higher calling. She experienced actually a couple of very intense out of body experiences, which I'm going to ask her about a bit more today, and how she saw herself in the interior of a huge Arcturian mothership. And she saw herself interacting and communicating with Arcturian and Palladian extraterrestrials. Absolutely incredible. And then through her ancestral connection with the Akashic records. And for those of you who are, I'm sure, heard this term, we're also going to dive more into what are the Akashic records and how they can really relate to us on a more human level today. She, Debbie, has been receiving downloads of our galactic historical information and also universal spiritual knowledge ever since that fateful encounter that she had. So she feels that it's a big part of her mission while she's here on Earth to help awaken others to their own true divine selves and their cosmic origins. So without further ado, welcome to the show. Debbie, how are you?
Hey, thanks for having me on. It's been good to finally connect, and I guess we met through Neil Gar, so with Portal to Ascension. Neil's wonderful, so I figure anybody that's a friend of Neil's got to be wonderful too. So thank
Uh,
you.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Debbie, and thank you,
yeah,
Neil. Thank you, Neil. He's a very
yeah,
good mutual friend of ours. You know, I was
yeah.
lucky. I was lucky enough to see Debbie do some of her talks on this galactic cruise just back in December of 2024, which was through Neil and Portal to Ascension. And anyone that's watching the show right now, listening to the show right now, if you really like what we're talking about, what we get into, all of Debbie's information is going to be available in the description below. You got to check out her stuff because when we she gets into the details, it just gets even more fascinating. And as we're going to show you today, our history is just incredible and not at all what you get in the history books, right, Debbie?
No, not at all. No. Yeah, that's
So
only a little tiny smidgen of our
we're we're, t-
galactic history.
we're
Yeah,
talking a fraction. We're talking like
yeah,
the
yeah.
one the
Like
1% here.
yeah, 1%. Yes, totally.
Yeah. So I mean, before we get into that, though, I would love to just hear a little bit more about this awakening that you had, and what an incredible way to have this happen through a contact experience. Maybe if you want to just walk us through one of your first contact experiences, like what was that like for you?
Yeah, sure. So just to give a backdrop of my story, I was somebody that was not interested in the paranormal, metaphysics, spirituality. I mean, I was raised Roman Catholic and, I had a pretty, I would say, ordinary upbringing. I was part of a military family, so we traveled a lot. And I joined the military as well. I was in the U.S. Navy for 6 years, worked as a hospital corpsman slash preventive medicine tech, so I did that for a number of years and pretty much worked mostly in science, so I wasn't really a creative person per se or really interested in metaphysical topics, so I started getting introduced to it more through my now husband. So when we were dating, I noticed that he would read a lot of magazines and articles about UFOs and ETs, and even then I was kind of like, there's got to be an explanation. This can't be real, you know. So I was a real skeptic, you know, for a number of years, and then. I would have never imagined that I would be a person that would have that kind of experience, you know. And a lot of times when you read about the ETs, they're always like the grays or the white, what they call the tall whites, or you know, the typical ufology, you know. So not, you know, kind of like the bad guys, you know. So I had no interest, you know. Um, but I do think, you know, just reading those articles and it was expanding my consciousness. So it was getting me, you know, at least thinking beyond just, you know, this reality. So back in 2012, um, you know, I was sending, I don't know, I was thinking about, you know, wow, there's a lot of changes. You know, we're talking about the Mayan calendar and that we were going through this big election during that time. And it just seems like, you know, the planet was going to hell in a handbasket. I mean, it was just, you know, I didn't like what I was seeing, you know, just, you know, a lot of animal species were going extinct and, you know, you know, the black rhinoceros and, you know, quite a few others. But so I was really worried, and so I always joked that I'm a spiritual worrier, not a spiritual warrior, you know. So I was always worried about stuff. So one sleepless night, I sent a prayer out to the universe asking for divine assistance for planet Earth, and I sent it out to every extraterrestrial, or it wasn't even extraterrestrial. I was just sending it out to any interdimensional being I could think of, like angels or Mother Mary or Jesus or ascended masters. You know, I mean, I was just trying to think of beings that could help our planet. And then at the last minute, I included galactic brothers and sisters. I don't know why I even thought that, you know, but it was just something that I threw in there at the last minute. Hey, we need help. We really need help on planet Earth. And so a couple of weeks went by after my big prayer. You know, I forgot all about the prayer, didn't even think about it again. And then, so this was like back in May of 2012. And then at some point, I went to sleep one night and my husband and I were going through this transition where we're really solidifying our relationship and we were moving in together. Um, in So we picked this location between the two cities we lived in. So he lived in Denver, I lived in Colorado Springs, so we were moving to Castle Rock. And um, so I was going to bed one night. This was kind of in transition to our move, and so I went to sleep, and then when I came to consciousness, I was in a different reality. And I knew immediately it wasn't a dream because it was just too real. So when you're in the higher dimensional realms, reality is very hyper real. Like, it's hard to describe unless you've experienced it yourself, but it's not like a lucid dream where things are still kind of hazy and, you know, vague. This was Details were super sharp. You could see auras around things. Colors were brilliant. I mean, you just don't see reality like that even in 3D, you know. So I was kind of in this reality and I was looking around and it looked like I was in some sort of a spacecraft or a ship, but it didn't look metallic. You know, it was kind of like its own consciousness. It was maybe comprised of light and plasma-like material. So it had its own consciousness. It seemed like it was very organic, like it was shift and change as needed. And I'd never seen a ship like that. I couldn't even imagine a ship like that. It was just something I could not have imagined. So I noticed the ship was kind of guiding me. I don't know how it was guiding me, but it was kind of guiding me towards a specific space. So I kind of followed along and I found myself in this large room And on the other side of the room were like 4 or 5 extraterrestrial beings. And I knew right away they were extraterrestrial. There was no way there was humans that looked like that. They had humongous auras. As a matter of fact, their auras were so bright, I couldn't even see them directly at first. It was just like you just see all this light and color, and you saw like some shapes, but then as I got used to the frequency that they were emitting, I started realizing, yeah, they don't look like they're from here. They look like aliens. But and then I was trying to figure out like how do I talk to them? Like do they understand me? And then as I was thinking up questions in my head, they were answering me in telepathy. So they were picking up on my thoughts. And so I asked them, the usual questions like, who are you? What is this? Where am I? Why am I here? You know, it, and so, excuse me. So these beings, they told me they were Arcturians from Arcturus. And a lot of us, I think, since the last decade or so, know what Arcturians are, but during that time, I had no idea. And they told me that they were from the star system of Arcturus in the constellation of Bodes. And they had this big, like, holographic sphere that we were in that they were kind of like showing where Arcturus was located in the galaxy. And it felt really real, like you could see, the star system and the planets. And so I was pretty amazed. And then I asked, well, where are we? What is this? And they said, this is our mothership. And they told me where it was located. They said it was in our solar system. And it was in the space between the asteroid belt and Jupiter. And I was like, okay, at least it's not that far, still far, but not that far. And they told me that the reason why they brought me up was because they heard my prayer. And I was like, wow, you actually heard that prayer? It was like, um, and they said they were impressed, that they felt like I was ready. They felt like that I was ready to know who I truly was and why I was on Earth. And I had a lot of questions about Earth, like why are things so messed up? Why is there so much suffering? What is religion? What's politics? What is this stuff that we're dealing with? And they kept telling me that Earth was in a dimensional realm that was an illusion. So they kept using the word illusion. And I was just like, what do you mean illusion? Everything looks real. You can feel things, in the 3D. And so I didn't quite understand what they meant by illusion, but now I understand it more. But they also told me mostly about just how everything is artificial in the 3D. It's not really a true reality. And after seeing what their reality looks like, I can kind of say, yeah, I think they're right. That's the real reality. It's like a hyper reality when you're in 4D or 5D or beyond, So I kind of at that point, um, I had spent a lot of time with the Arcturians. They answered all my questions. They even cracked a few jokes here and there. So they had a sense of humor, and they told me I was one of them. And they said I had chosen to be on a mission on planet Earth, but I forgotten my mission. And they said it's not your fault, the energies are dense, on 3D. And so they said we want to remind you, that you're here on a mission. And that blew my mind because I was just like, I can't even believe I'm connected with these beings, like why would they have interest in me? Because I'm a nobody. I told them that I'm a nobody. Why would you have me here? Why not my husband who's been following UFOs, since childhood, but who knows? I get that question a lot from people, like why do certain people get to visit, ETs and others don't? And I don't have an answer for that. The only thing I could think of is I think they want to see that you're willing to be of service to others. So before I went on board the ship, I had spent 6 years volunteering as part of an animal assisted therapy team. You can read about, my story with Piglet, my therapy animal, on my website. So just go into the about section and you'll see it there. If you're interested in that story, I won't get into it too much, but I spent 6 years, every single moment I had free, I was volunteering, throughout the community, including Fort Carson, the soldiers at Fort Carson. We were part of the American Red Cross. So I think part of it is they like to see, are you willing to really be of service? Um, and I tell people that, so that's the only thing I can think of. They did show me around the ship. I saw technology I could never even imagine in a million years. I mean, it was just amazing. It was beyond description and comprehension, some of the things I saw. And I noticed the ship was huge. It was so huge, it was like a city sized. It was huge. There was hundreds of beings on this ship. And not all of them were Arcturians. A lot of them were different species of beings, mostly humanoid. I would say most of them more or less had humanoid features, but you could tell they weren't from Earth, and they had some non-humanoid beings. They had some feline-looking beings, and they had some that looked amphibian. And at the time, I also interacted with Pleiadian beings. So they were helping me in the atrium when I was trying to go on the light shaft and was kept getting thrown off. And that was pretty much my experience. And then I woke up, and I was back in my bed, and I knew at that point something extraordinary had happened. I knew it was like a real experience. I knew that my life had changed. I was not the same person, and that I was never going to be the same after that. And of course, the first person I told was my husband, so I told him what happened. He thought it was a crazy dream at first, but then he was like, okay, maybe there is. I mean, because I've been telling this story now for over a decade, so I think he now knows that, something had happened, because one of the things he noticed was that my personality completely changed. Like I was no longer fearful. I was no longer depressed all the time. I had a purpose, um, so it felt like, things had really improved. It was a long journey, though. I mean, it wasn't easy. So the way the Akashic records play into all of this, I'll get into that, and then you can ask some more questions about galactic history. But
Yeah, that'd
uh,
be great. Appreciate it.
yeah, yeah. So I was getting downloads of information. Like after I had that experience, I had a number of very strange events that occurred, and I was seeing UFOs all the time, like all the time. I was having encounters with Pleiadian beings, just in real time, just like what's going on, I think you can read about one of those stories in my blog. I think it's still in the blog, but it was just a weird. And then I had interdimensional travels. I was remote viewing. I mean, it was like all of a sudden, like everything was turned on. And at first I thought I was going crazy because I was getting downloads of galactic information. Like all of a sudden, I knew all these star systems. I knew the races that were associated with these star systems. I knew their history. I knew their culture. I knew everything. And it was like, how did I learn all this overnight? And so I was thinking, was I making this up? I mean, it's weird, weird stuff, but so this started me on this whole journey of self-discovery, where I was trying to discover what's real, what's not real. I did a lot of research, read a lot of books, took a lot of spiritual classes. I live in Colorado, so we have a lot of spiritual offerings here. Colorado is one of the most progressive states when it comes to spirituality and metaphysics. So I felt very fortunate to live here. And this all led me to taking classes. And I was taking a local Reiki class. I took classes in everything. I mean, it didn't matter what it was. It was like if it's Native American medicine, I was taking a class in that. If it was crystal healing, I was taking a class in that. I didn't care. I was just like, I was like a sponge, you know. So I started taking Reiki classes in my hometown of Castle Rock, and I was talking to my Reiki teacher about my experiences. I said, I'm getting downloads. I don't know where this stuff is coming from. And she said, I think they're coming from the Akashic Records. I think you're tuning in. And I said, what is the Akashic Records? And she explained it to me. And I was like, I gotta, wow, that's amazing. And then she says, I teach classes on how to read the records. And I said, are you serious? I said, I gotta sign up for that class, you know? So that's kind of started my whole journey with Akashic Records was, you know, I finally learned how to read them at will rather than just getting, you know, random downloads. And even after there was, I think she taught like 3 levels, and even after level 1, I was starting to realize, wow, I have a gift for this. You know, I can help some people. So I started. I was still working my 3D job. I worked for public health department in Colorado Springs for a number of years, but I was doing readings on the side. And at first, it was kind of like a hobby, like okay, this is a cute way to make a little extra cash and you know, just help some people out, you know, and then it just got bigger and bigger. And then I was, at the same time, I was invited to speak at various venues about galactic history, particularly University of Colorado in Boulder, you know. So yeah, I got invited to speak there. That was like my very first presentation. And I was like, holy crap, you know,
With the university too. I mean,
yeah, I
that's
know. It's like,
surprising, right?
yeah, it was. It was through a group called Boulder EXO. So they were a extraterrestrial, kind of a fringe group that had meetups and they would do presentations. And they would always have these presentations at the Wolf Law building at, you know, CU, you know. So I was just like, wow, I don't think I'm in Kansas anymore. You know, I think I'm about to, you know, this is you know, a kind of a foretelling of what's going to happen. But I think it was like 200 people attended that, and people still talk about it. People locally still talk about that presentation.
Oh,
That
wow.
it was a 3-hour presentation on all different star races and their history and and it's kind of what got me connected with Gaia TV. So all of a sudden, I was doing presentations all throughout the Front Range, and some of the Gaia employees were finding out about me, and they wanted readings. So I was starting to do readings for some of the Gaia people who became my friends. You know, I'm friends with quite a few of them, and they were just like, wow, your readings are amazing. Let's get you on a show, you know. So it took a couple of years, but then after a while, I think my first show on the Beyond Belief, it was on Beyond Belief with George Norrie. That show, I think they taped it in May 2020. It took a while. I mean, it didn't happen overnight, you know, so it wasn't like an overnight sensation or anything. You know, it took a long time, you know, just because I started doing Akashic readings, I think around 2014. So about 2 years after I had my experience. So I was doing readings for a while, you know, even before Gaia even thought to, you know, bring me on. And I've been on their shows now, I think about half a dozen times, maybe even more. I mean, they keep calling me back, but that's how people have found out about me. Plus, I was, you know, involved with some starseed groups online. I think Facebook had a few groups. The one I'm thinking of the most is called MECN, which is Meet Earth Cosmic Neighbors. met a lot of great people through that. So that's kind of how I got on this journey. It's been a long journey, but uh,
It always is a long journey too, right?
yeah.
And it's just I love it. Like thank you for all that because it's always so fascinating. And one thought that came to me just to quickly backtrack to when you're in this interdimensional space,
Hmm.
when you're let's say when you were on that spacecraft, that mothership, the way you described how it feels, I wonder, is it similar to when we're in, let's say, a higher, maybe we're in meditation and we've attained a higher state of consciousness and everything like that DMT release happens, or an NDE, near death experience, or a heavy psychedelic trip where colors are more vivid, you can see auras, all of a sudden it's just like your senses are far more attuned. Is it similar to that?
Yeah,
Or
I would say so. As a matter of fact, when I first started doing public appearances, in the Front Range, which is, right here in the kind of the Denver, Boulder corridor in Colorado, uh, I was asked to compare my experiences with an NDE person, with a person that went through an NDE. So she was talking about her experience, and I was talking about my experience, and it was very similar, very kind of similar. I mean, there was a few differences. Obviously, I didn't have to die, to have
that's nice.
my experience, but yeah, very similar. And I think it's very similar to somebody maybe going on an ayahuasca trip or a DMT trip, but I would say for me, the experience lasted longer. Like it felt like I was gone for hours and hours. Maybe it felt like even when I was in the experience, I was there forever. It just felt like I would, like when I came back, it was just like the next morning, and it was just like, wow, that felt like I was there for a long time. So there is no linear time when you're in these realms, but yeah, I would say you're correct. It's very similar.
Interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think, when we do, have these experiences, it kind of expands our consciousness to move into a higher realm, So
And that
whether it's,
makes, sorry, go
yeah,
ahead.
yeah, I would say whether it's an ET contact experience or an NDE or whatever,
And I
yeah.
imagine that's what then allowed all these other things to come online for you, right? And then that's where the
Hmm.
Akashic Records all of a sudden become so attainable. And just one last thing on the Akashic Records, I've always been really curious is when you're sending, let's say, as kind of sending your consciousness there essentially,
Hmm.
it let's say if there is a location to for our audience right now, just to help a
Yeah.
little bit with the description, if there is a location, it's a higher dimensional or an other dimensional location where this Akashic Records is. And roughly what I've heard from other people like Edgar Casey and other people that access this database essentially
Hmm.
is that it's almost like you're going to a library of sorts in another dimension. Is that how you would describe it, kind of? Or what's your
Yeah.
feeling on that?
Yeah, I think people see it in different ways, so I think it's just based on maybe your frame of reference. Honestly, don't see it like a library. I see it more like crystalline structures, and I see like the Akashic guides. And usually for me, the Akashic guides look very Arcturian. I think a lot of them are probably keepers of the records, because they were the ones that were processing souls after death, so they have you know, that Stargate that is the Stargate of souls. That's basically what Arcturus is known for. But the way I see it is I'm accessing like I don't know, the easiest way I can describe it is like a crystal, like I'm tuning into somebody's crystal that contains all their information. And then I'm tuning into that, and then it kind of opens up, and it plays like a movie. So for me, I'm very clairvoyant. I see things really well through my third eye. So I see it like a movie. But I also get messages from the guide, so it's very clairaudient. I sometimes will smell smells. I will hear music. I will feel feelings. Like a lot of times, I will feel my clients' feelings, what they were experiencing during that. period of time that I'm looking at. So that's why Akashic Records readings can be pretty exhausting, because all your clear senses are totally online, So, I mean, if you want to do the reading correctly, so if you're really wanting to tune in and get as much information as possible, um, so I see it like a movie, so I'm seeing their story from the beginning, what lives did they have, what star systems were they in, so and a lot of times I pick up information about, like, sometimes I'll look in somebody's records and I was like, wow, I never saw this before, never knew this about a certain star system, or I never knew this is the reason why they did things this way, or you get some little snippet of information that's like, you kind of tuck it away, like, oh, okay. And a lot of times the reason why they're showing it is because it's relevant to the client. There's something about that is relevant to the client, or maybe even relevant to me. I don't know. But and so I'll share a lot of times what I see to the client. And sometimes I get random information that's just like, why am I seeing this? For instance, I did a reading for somebody yesterday, and he was an older gentleman in his 70s, and I kept seeing horses. I kept seeing horses. And so I told him, I think you had some past lives taking care of horses. And then he's like, oh my God. He said, I can't believe you picked that up. He said, I've been taking care of, I've been raising and breeding horses for a number of years, even in this lifetime, so sometimes you'll see random things like that, for instance, another example is, uh, a client of mine was asking me why her husband loves griffins. And I looked in the records and I said, his family crest has a griffin on it. And sure enough, we looked it up. We looked up his last name, and sure enough, there was a griffin on his family crest. How I knew that, I would never have guessed that in a million years. But
And
uh,
you just can't make that up, right? Like
yeah,
these are
I
the
mean, yeah, it's
things.
just like you get like these sometimes these little tidbits of information that is really relevant, and that's what I think what makes reading the records a lot of fun a lot of times, because maybe you don't think anything of it, but it might have great meaning for the client, so.
Yeah, and that's fascinating, Debbie, because you're getting like the most incredible movie experience. You're getting all the senses. You're getting a very, it sounds just a very like holistic perspective on all this history, on these other lifetimes. And now knowing that you've got this incredible database now to work with and all of your experience with this now, what this is one of the big questions I'm always asking here is when did then, from your perspective, right, with all this, when did humans come onto the scene? And which might sound like a simple question. We both know it's probably pretty complex, right? And what is, from your perspective, like we still struggle to this day to know what our origins even are. And
Hmm.
from your perspective, when did humans come into being? And I know from a more, I guess, higher perspective standpoint, how did we get to where we are today?
Yeah, I'll have to give you the abridged
Oh, I
version.
know. That's a big
I
question
know,
I
I
just
mean, we
threw at
can
you
spend
there.
hours talking on this topic, but um, so the human form, so the humanoid form is actually what they call the Adamic Karman form. I mean, that's kind of repeated throughout multiple universes. So it's a form that, I don't know, maybe it's close to God, or maybe it represents some aspect of God or some soul shard of God. So when I looked in the records, I was seeing other universes that had humanoid beings, so it's not just our universe, but it's just a common physical form that's been used over and over again because it works, two arms, a head, two legs, kind of works, um, and maybe it's because it look, when you spread out, kind of look like a star, so
I keep thinking of Da Vinci's The Vitruvian
yeah,
Man, right?
the Vitruvian Man, yeah,
Yeah.
so yeah,
Yeah.
um, so it's a form that, I think has been used over and over again. But in our universe, so we live in a multi-universe reality. So our universe was, so each universe has its turn going through this separation from source. So the separation from source, we're separating from source, which is this singularity, this oneness, and we're moving away from that into separation. And so part of the separation process is delving into the physical realm, so the more separated we become, the more physical we become, so as our universe's turn to go through this process, and my understanding from what I've seen in the records was that originally physicality was supposed to occur in the Andromeda Galaxy. So the Andromeda Galaxy was supposed to be set up to have this physical experience, but it was so high vibrational it couldn't sustain it, So the Andromeda Galaxy Soul Group, which were like etheric light beings, so these were co-creator beings. They decided that, we're going to create another galaxy. We'll create one that's like our galaxy, but is denser, has more lower dimensions, So they created the Milky Way. And so the Milky Way actually separated from the Andromeda Galaxy. And actually, this is a scientific fact because I was reading an article, and several articles have said this, where these are scientific articles that say that as we speak, the Milky Way gets closer and closer to the Andromeda Galaxy every year. I mean, obviously, it's like, the Andromeda Galaxy is 200 light years away. I mean, we're inching closer to it. So we're not going to converge with them for a while, maybe like 3 million years or a billion years from now. But eventually we are converging back. So this is part of that whole cycle. But getting back to what I was talking about, um, so these Andromeda Galaxy beings, because they were so devoted to their project, decided we're going to accompany this new galaxy. And so they created the Antares Stargate, which is the portal between Andromeda Galaxy and the Milky Way. So that's the number one, that's the first portal. Second portal is Arcturus, which we already talked about. That's the Stargate of Souls. So the whole purpose was to create this separation, this process of separation. And so these Andromeda Galaxy beings, and formed galactic councils in the what we call the Galactic Center or Galactic Sun, which is actually the space between Scorpio and Sagittarius. It's actually at 28 degrees Sagittarius, so that's considered to be Galactic Center. And so there was galactic councils that were developed that were creating oversouls, so there was oversouls that were assigned to different parts of the galaxy. And the biggest oversoul was the Lyra Vega oversoul group. That's what I call it anyway. It probably has a different name, but I call it that. So these were the beings that were going to start physical reality in the Lyra system because Lyra had the conditions most inhabitable for physical reality. Even today, most of our inhabitable exoplanets are in the Lyra constellation. So there's quite a few, like in Proxima Centauri, and I mean, there's other, random ones here and there, but I would say at least 5 of the 10 most inhabitable exoplanets are still in the Lyra system. So obviously it was pretty nice to have planets there. And so they created these physical planets, and they invited in these felines from a different universe. So there was these etheric feline beings. So a lot of people have heard of feline, beings, associated with Lyra, but they were actually not originally from Lyra. These beings were originally from a different universe, but they were in etheric form, but they were creating physical versions of themselves, on Lyra. So they were creating kind of humanoid looking lion beings or feline beings. But they were kept ascending too quickly. So then they started creating more physical versions of themselves. And then they were mixing with avian genetics and simian genetics, and they created a humanoid being. that we now know as humans, you know. So they created not just one but two human races because they wanted representations of pretty much the most basic template of the splitting of source, which is the mother goddess consciousness and the father god consciousness. So so the first race that was developed was what I call the Vegan race, the Vega race. So these were the blue-skinned humans that were representing Mother Goddess consciousness. So these were the humans that were higher dimensional humans, but these were the humans that the Vedic texts were talking about in India. So these beings were visiting Earth way back when. And so when the the East Indians were talking about blue-skinned beings that were coming out of these Vimanas, they were talking about Vega people. Okay. I mean, they kind of look like Avatar, the people in Avatar,
That's
like,
right.
yeah, really tall, blue skin, very
Hmm.
beautiful beings, lived in beautiful paradise planets. I mean, that's what Avatar was about. I mean, it was about Lyra, pretty much. And then they created kind of a father god version of humans, which were more the Caucasian looking people. So they looked pretty Nordic. They had lighter skin, lighter hair, very tall. Maybe not as tall as the Vegans, but they were still pretty tall. And these were the giants that people were talking about that were, visiting Earth way back when. So people were talking about these giants, that were visiting. So these beings, had pretty advanced technology, because they were visiting Earth way back when. And they lived in beautiful paradise planets. Their planets were plentiful. It had, abundant resources, just I mean, I always think of, the planet on the Avatar movie, Pangea. That's what it was like. It was beautiful. It was just beyond comprehension, beautiful. And so they were living in peace and unity consciousness for thousands of years on these planets. Until one day, there was some draconian being. So Draco, if you look on a star map, I have one right here on my wall. Um, can't see it, but it's there. But if you look at a star map, so here's Galactic Center, here's Aquila, which is the Eagle constellation, and then you got Cygnus over here, and then Lyra's over here, and then you got Draco. Okay, so Draco was right next door. So you got these beings that were reptilian beings that were service to self beings, and they were kicked out of their universe. That was something else I saw in the records. So I didn't know, where did reptilians come from? Oh, they came from another universe too. They got kicked out, of their universe. So they were pissed.
I didn't know that was a thing. You can get kicked out of a universe.
Yeah, they got kicked out by some avian beings that they were in a big war with in that other universe. So I think the avian beings got fed up and just decided we're going to use our advanced technology and oust these beings
Yeah.
into another universe.
Wow.
So we inherited somebody else's problem children, I
It
guess.
seems like we have, yes.
Yeah. So those beings were unhappy because they used to live in beautiful planets, in their old universe. And then in Draco, the planets were barren. They didn't have much resources, so they were looking at Lyra and they were like, wow, those planets are pretty nice. We need to conquer that system, and use all their resources, so my understanding of the story of between, of the whole Lyran Draconian Wars, is that, and some people have different versions of the story, but this is just what I saw in the records, is that the Draconians always intended on deceiving the Lyrans because that's their MO, so they saw these beings that they had some technology, but not quite as advanced as theirs, um, and they were, just very open-hearted beings, kind of naive, maybe, and they just thought, oh yeah, we could fool these guys easy. So they reached out to them saying, hey, we just noticed, we're your next door neighbors. I mean, I'm just kind of paraphrasing here, but we noticed you guys have a lot of resources on your planets. And maybe we can help each other out. Like, hey, we got great technology and you guys got great resources. Let's do a trade. So they talked the Lyrans into letting them access their planets, and they started using that opportunity to see how can we attack these beings, like what's their weak areas? And they had a lot of weak areas, so they ambushed the Lyrans, unaware, so the Lyrans thought, oh yeah, these are our new friends, and no. So this is the first big betrayal, so I actually think, the Bible, the whole story of Adam and Eve, I think that was more an allegorical story about, the fall of man, the fall of paradise, so, with the snake representing Draco, um, and I don't know, maybe Adam and Eve were representative of the white Lyrans and the blue Vegan people. I don't know, but I always kind of saw it more as an allegory. But um, so so they brutally attacked Lyra. I mean, Avalon and Avion were the two planets that were hit the most because they were the biggest,
Hmm.
and they figured if they took out those planets, everything else would fall, and pretty much that's what happened. And these beings were decimated. I mean, they say 50 million Lyrans lost their lives during the wars. Complete planets were annihilated. I mean, some people say three. I saw five that were annihilated. And the beings that survived, barely survived. I mean, they were hightailing it out of there, including some of the Vega ships were hightailing it out of there. So, Lissa Royale Holt, her book, The Prism of Lyra, kind of corroborates with my story quite a bit. So I think she's onto something, and I was onto something because I kind of compare and contrast. And I thought, she talks about a lot of the same stuff I'm seeing, um,
And it just sounds quickly, Debbie, like it just sounds like Star Wars, for lack of a better pop
I know
culture
it is. It is
reference,
the whole
isn't it?
story of, yeah, it's like the whole hero's journey, right? You go through a fall, and everything's lost,
But and even just the details of these planets being decimated, populations annihilated, and some species just maybe having a couple thousand, if that, escape for the
Yeah.
remnants of their species, trying to make it a fresh start on a new planet
And
elsewhere,
new planets. Yeah, there were this
right?
so this is what caused the spread of these beings was the wars.
Okay.
So so a lot of the Vega ships headed towards Sirius and Orion, and then a lot of the White Lyran ships headed towards Pleiades and Andromeda. Obviously, there was more other systems too, but that's just kind of a simplification. Uh, and a lot of them intermixed. Like for instance, in Sirius, there was Vega and Lyran people intermixing and marrying each other and having babies, and so that was our first mixed race people. And Syrians had light blue skin for that reason. Very intelligent race of people. Pleiadians. They were a beautiful group of people, so they developed very beautiful star systems. Arcturus was kind of like its own consciousness. So Arcturian star seeds are a little different. Like we're kind of like, I consider myself an Arcturian star seed. I think that's my origination point, although I know I've been in a lot of systems. That's why I know all the stories. Uh, but we're kind of like our own consciousness because we're kind of like the guardians of the galaxy. Like we had to be the overseers, so we weren't a descendant of the Lyran, refugees like quite a few other races were, but there was a lot of them that ended up in Orion. Speaking of Star Wars, Orion was like, I think Star Wars is like a thinly veiled version of the Orion Wars, because when I was looking at Orion, I was like, yeah, they had an empire. So the outlier stars of Orion was all like the Draconian Empire, and then the belt stars was all like the resistance fighters,
Yep.
So
Yeah.
Those are the people that were just like, no, we want our self-sovereignty. We're not going to succumb to the empire, So there's a whole story in Orion. And
This
then
is
Orion kind of led to the Earth story. Okay, so
okay. Okay.
I'll finish it up with Earth, and then I'll let you ask some more questions. So Orion was they were in conflict and wars for millions of years because it was kind of like a melting pot. So you had all kinds of different beings that were living in this one system, and it's a pretty big system. So they had reptilians that were living there. That had reptilian outposts in Rigel, Bellatrix, and Betelgeuse. They had insectoid beings. They had gray aliens, tall grays. They had amphibian beings. They had all kinds of beings. Okay, so I always kind of jokingly refer to the cantina scene in the original Star Wars movie. Like that was what Orion was like. It was just like a whole mix of beings, including humans. But a lot of the Vega and Lyran refugees ended up there too, mostly in the belt stars, so that's where they kind of inhabited. But so they were in war for millennia, and then they called in help from the Galactic Federation. So they were, so these resistance fighters knew they were outnumbered, and they were just like, we need some help. So let's call on our benevolent brothers and sisters. And so eventually they did achieve unity consciousness in Orion. It took a very, very long time, but they did achieve it. So some of the Orion factions, the negative Orion factions, didn't want to be assimilated into this light consciousness. So they were looking for new worlds to conquer. And so they came to our solar system because we have some nice planets. There used to be a planet between Jupiter and Mars called Maldek. And so they were inhabiting Maldek. And they went into a civil war. Maldek got destroyed. It's now the asteroid belt. They started inhabiting Mars. I don't know. They didn't stay on Mars. And then they were checking out Earth. Oh, Earth is much nicer than Mars. Let's go to that place. So there was already civilizations and ET extraterrestrial colonization on planet Earth. And so there was two civilizations that were big during this time. That was Lemuria in the Pacific and Atlantis in the Atlantic Ocean. And so they decided to infiltrate Atlantis and created a war between Lemuria and Atlantis. So we see the same themes over and over and over again. So Lemuria fell, then eventually Atlantis fell, and then Egypt started. Egypt was kind of the converging of these two civilizations. And then we kind of went on from there. So that's pretty much galactic history in a nutshell. So
Wow.
yeah,
Geez,
so a
thank you,
long
Debbie.
story. Yeah. So
Yeah, and I know you're doing a great job just honestly glossing over millions of years of
it's kind of hard not to go digress into some little aspect, but I was trying to
right?
just give the overview.
No,
But
that was beautiful.
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
along for the
yeah,
ride. I was hanging on every word. I mean, it's just
yeah.
such a. I described this for my journey in the last 10 years of uncovering our history as well, which is it plays like the best action thriller,
Oh,
the
I
best
know. It's amazing.
fantasy novel. I mean, it makes Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter look like nothing, it's or Star Wars or whatever. Like the greatest stories we've ever been able to dream up still don't even compare to what the reality actually is of right now, but also how we even got here. And one thing I just wanted to quickly ask, I guess, and I want to be mindful of our time here, but I now that we've kind of gone to this is now okay, so we kind of now know where the humans come into play here.
Mhm.
Are we the last sort of civilization, last intelligent race to sort of take over planet Earth? Because what you just briefly touched on sounds like Earth has had thousands, maybe millions of years of other advanced civilizations, not necessarily human. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, totally. I mean, the reptilians took over and were creating dinosaurs, for a while,
Oh, they were the ones behind the
Oh yeah, they
dinosaurs, I
were
think.
they were creating big versions of themselves. So yeah, that was Yeah, so the reptilians kind
Wow.
of took over for a while, and then the dinosaurs got wiped out. I don't think that was an accident. I think that was
Like
purposeful,
wiped
Yeah.
the slate
Yeah.
clean kind of, okay.
Wipe the slate clean. Yeah. And then they talk about the big flood that really happened. So there's
Oh yeah.
actually physical evidence that that happened. Um, so I think a lot of the Bible stories kind of touch on the truth, but they don't tell the whole truth. So they just kind of give you like a piece of it, like um, told by the perspective of humans that probably heard the story from Sumerians or Babylonians. So they were just kind of piecing together half truths here and there. But I mean, I think they did a decent job of
Yeah.
pretty much giving the general story. But
Well, especially now that we have, the Dead Sea Scrolls and all these other,
yeah, totally. Yeah, so
verifying scripture.
verifying things that have happened in the past. But so the humans that are currently humans now, we're kind of a composite of a multitude of different star races. Um, so our genetics here on planet Earth, we're just kind of like a compilation of at least 22 different star races of beings. And so that's why we have so much diversity on this planet. Why, I mean, even the animals, we have so much diversity of animals. Their DNA came from other places, and plants, and even crystals and rocks. I mean, a lot of the DNA came from other planets that were seeded here from these ET colonists that were coming here even long before Atlantis. So we're kind of like considered to be kind of like the last experiment, like let's see if we can get all this genetics together, mix it all up in one little planet and see what comes out of it. And so that's why we have so many different consciousness mindsets. Like some people are very much in the 3D. They just can't seem to wrap their mind around, or some people are really very dark oriented. Others are very light oriented. So we got this duality consciousness here, like you could never even imagine. And it's this big last experience of, okay, this is the densest reality in the galaxy. Let's see what happens. Let's see if we can make this place ascend. And actually, compared to other star systems, we are probably moving through ascension a lot faster. So I told you how it took Orion millions and millions of years. Now we're in a period where we're kind of rapidly evolving at this point. So and this has been not seen in other systems before this. And I think it's because we're kind of like galactic mutts, or we're kind of a mix. So we've taken the best and the worst of all these different star DNA and star race DNA. And I honestly think we're gonna see ascension happen in our lifetime, to where it's currently happening now. I just think we have a lot of humans here that are unable to awaken, or don't, or maybe have chosen not to. So and there's
Well,
still kind of this play out of the dark cabal. I mean, this is a whole other conversation, but the powers to be that want to hang on to the power. So these are the descendants of the negative Orion factions I was telling you about,
right.
Contactee and the
And I was going to ask, is that like the kind of, are we seeing the remnants? I like to say now it's the powers that were, because I
hmm
really feel like, it is shifting so much. I think we can just see all that energy around us, right? But
yeah.
with the powers that were those the draconian that came over to planet Earth, and then
hmm
as you've explained, and as our audience has kind of now got the pattern, what do the
hmm
draconians do? They deceive, right?
hmm
Illusion, which is what we've been
hmm
dealing with for how many thousands of years, essentially on this planet. And do you think that they came to planet Earth? That's how we sort of came to be the version we are today. Um, But do you think the draconians are really like one of the major influences? I know we're mutts, right? We've got a lot of DNA of a lot of different
Mhm.
species. Would you say though they're the maybe the most recent ones that have really been on this planet?
Oh yeah, yeah, I
Yeah,
would say.
manipulating, working with,
Yeah, and
against.
yeah, they and their descendants, so a lot of these people that are in royal families or in politics, they're
Hmm,
all from the same lineage, they're all related to each other. I mean,
right.
there a lot of them are shapeshifters. I mean, it's I've seen some shapeshifting. It's just yeah, it's pretty bizarre, but
Hmm.
that's a whole other conversation. But yeah, it's yeah, they're trying to hang on to their power. I mean, they're just hanging on at this point. I think they know that they're losing, because there's too many of people awakening. There's too many people asking questions. People aren't not willing to accept the status quo anymore. But I think they're just hanging on to power so they have control over the media, they have control over information. So they're kind of running the narrative right now, but it's a false narrative. It's not really reality, and but people see it, they see it online, they see it on TV, they believe it, so
The
for them,
illusion, right? Again.
illusion. Yeah. So they're masters of illusion. They're masters of deception. They've been deceiving people ever since the Lyra days, so they're trying to make us think that we're free, but we're actually been indentured servants or slaves for decades, if not hundreds of years, but that system is crumbling because there's the light beings or the white hats, if you want to call it that, that are changing things behind the scenes. It's just that you don't hear about it because, again, the dark cabal has control over the media. So you're going to hear what they want you to hear rather than what's the truth.
Well, and that's beautiful because on that note, let's segue into kind of wrapping up the episode here with your
Yeah.
thoughts on, where do we go from here with all this incredible galactic history and where we're at right now. The powers that were they are crumbling. And, we're at a beautiful point in our history where this is the ascension. And so I mean, that's a fascinating even concept to think that, in other galaxies, as an example, they could have been ascending for millions of years. We're doing it in a matter under, I mean, if you just look at the cycle or the blip that we're going through
Yeah.
right now since 2012, even since your awakening, since your experience, right? And I had a
Yeah.
huge
No, I mean,
awakening in 2012 as well. Actually, it was a big year
yeah.
for, I think, for people. And just since then, look how much we've evolved. So what do you see for, like, what do you see for the future? What do you hope for the future?
Oh, that's a great question and a great ending to this episode. But yeah, I would say I think there's a lot of us awakening right now. A lot of us have chosen to be here. So I always hear from star seeds like, "Oh, I don't want to be here. I hate it here." And I say, "Well, you chose to be here. You wanted to be here. You wouldn't be here if you didn't want to be here. So man up and or woman up and and do your starseed mission, so we can get out of here faster. Okay, so um so we all chose to be here because this is a monumental time of history. This is the apex life that we've all been waiting for thousands of years to happen. So we're seeing the movement, out of the Pisces age into the age of Aquarius, which is considered to be the golden age. And what we're going to see is the crumbling of old systems. We're going to see new monetary systems put into place, new extraterrestrial technologies being available to everybody. We're going to see equal distribution of wealth, which I do believe is going to happen. When, I don't know, but hopefully soon. Who knows? But we're also going to have contact with extraterrestrial beings where everybody's going to know about it. So everybody's going to know that we were visited by a race of people from Alpha Centauri or from Venus or from Sirius or some other system. So it's not going to be hidden hush hush anymore. And I think that's going to happen probably relatively quickly. I want to say the message I keep getting in the records is between 2028 and 2032. I mean, that timeline can change. I mean, because we always just see probabilities, but but that's just around the corner, you know. I mean, so I do think we're going to have contact, and we're going to finally become part of the greater galactic family at this point. So Earth is not going to be kind of isolated and sequestered into this little bubble anymore. We're going to see expansion of technology like you would not believe. The question is, are we going to use this technology for good, or are we going to use it for evil? You know, so but I did see in the records that a lot of timelines have shifted and changed. So this apocalyptic timeline that Nostradamus was talking about, that timeline has shifted. That is no longer going to happen. So and I think it's because all of us that are here, you know, all of us star seeds and light workers, that you like yourself, you're out there sharing the truth. I'm trying to share my own version of the truth, so we're just doing our best to get people aligned and get people back on track to becoming, returning to their galactic roots, so that's how I see it.
No, it's beautiful. And it's so true, right? Everyone, watching and listening to this episode, it's also something that we can do these things like have a podcast, like speak at events, write books and stuff. But I've kind of come around to the idea too that just our existence is also enough. Our vibration, just being alive and just being yourself, whatever that authentic
Yeah.
version of yourself is enough, for this
Yeah, it
planet.
is. Yeah, a lot of times I get questions from my clients like, what mission am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do? I feel like I'm kind of spinning my wheels. And I said, just be you, just you being here is making a huge difference. Maybe you don't see it or you don't recognize it, but each star seed has an effect on the vibration of a 50-mile radius. I mean, that's like a whole city, I mean,
Wow.
that's huge. So imagine all these little star seeds all over the place that we're all affecting everybody around us, just from us being here without even doing anything,
Just little ripples in the pond, just
Yeah,
little
exactly. Yeah,
things
yeah,
like that. Like when we were all together on the cruise, just in
yeah.
December, what an amazing feeling just to be around all you
Oh,
awesome
I
star
know. It
seeds,
was so
right?
great. Yeah, no, I still fondly look back on those times, and I'm looking forward to the next one,
Mm,
the Mediterranean one that's going to be next year. But um,
100%, 100%.
yeah, but
And
I think it's important for us to get together, even though we are kind of isolated and kind of spread out sometimes, but it's important for star seeds to get together, if nothing else, just for the camaraderie and the support and the love and just knowing that you're not alone.
knowing that you're
Yeah.
not crazy.
Yeah, you're not crazy. Yeah, no, it's just a lot of us
uh,
think the same way. Yeah, so
well, as you experience going from one very specific perspective to a very different one,
yeah.
it can be a lot. And so again, people watching and listening, check out Debbie's work and all of her. I mean, so many videos, so much amazing content, so much history, so much spiritual wisdom. Debbie, where can people best find you, best connect with you? Of course, we'll have all the links in the description below, everybody,
Oh,
but
totally.
whereabouts, Debbie, can we find
I
you?
would say best place is my website, debbiesolaris.com, just like you see on the screen here. Just debbiesolaris.com. And you can also find me on Instagram and YouTube uh, and Facebook. I still have a presence on Facebook, um, and that's, yeah. So you see me on your social media. If you are a Gaia subscriber, you can look up my episodes on Gaia. I think there's like 13 or 14 of them now. So
Yeah, I checked you out on Gaia there. I think you're over 10 for sure. You got a
yeah,
lot of
yeah. I think
good
it was at
stuff
least
there.
a dozen, if not more. But I think I did a couple of episodes on Deep Space with Sid Goldberg. So yeah. So
Great
just
show.
check me out there too. So and of course, my website. I do events. So I'm not doing as many this year as I did last year, but I will be in LA in August, and then in Sedona also in August, and then I'll be in Mexico in December. So, and a lot of online stuff too. So,
Beautiful.
yeah.
Beautiful. Well, again, thanks, Debbie. And yeah, so everyone watching and listening, check out Debbie's work and just link up with her if you want to get to know more or attend any of her workshops, events, all that good stuff. And Debbie, thank you so much for coming on
Thank you
the
for
show
having
today.
me. It was great to reconnect with you.
Likewise, likewise. So, everyone, thank you very much for watching another episode of Ancient Mysteries Unearthed. And until next time, much love.
Thank you.